Welcome to the Podcasting Mentor Podcast, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are ready to stop hiding and start showing up on the right stages without the burnout. I'm Candace Dudley, podcast guesting strategist, and your go-to for turning interviews into your favorite marketing and networking tool. And guess what? My Podcast Guesting Accelerator is now enrolling for summer. Yep, this is your sign to finally get off the sidelines and into the spotlight. Like my client, Kelly, who landed 8 guest spots in a single week after we worked together. She called it a no-brainer and said she'd 1000% do it again. That's the power of intentional guesting, and that's exactly what I'll help you do. Let's get brave, let's get strategic, and let's get you heard. Head to the show notes for more details on my Podcast Guesting Accelerator. Okay, I'm super excited today. I have Kelly Kumler on. She is a brand, website, and SEO strategist, helping service providers and creative entrepreneurs build personality-packed brands that actually get you found. And she specializes in turning your website into a powerful marketing tool, not just a pretty placeholder. I love that you blend the two together so we really get functional and beauty. So welcome, and why don't you just start with giving us a snapshot? I already kind of said who you help, but what do you do? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Like you, I was a former teacher and left the classroom after having kids and tried to figure out what the heck was next. So I did have some very self-taught background in design and got myself into brand and website design. And shortly after, I started hearing so many horror stories, either from my own clients or just people on the internet about them going through, spending all this money to get their website done and then finding out that their traffic had completely tanked and they no longer had any SEO in place. So I made it a priority pretty upfront to invest in learning SEO as well. And that's where I just kind of fell in love with both sides of it and have served both ever since.
Oh, that's awesome. I actually have the exact same story with my website. I paid someone to do it because you don't know what you don't know. And you're like, I know I'm ready for a website years ago. And she created this beautiful, beautiful website. A few years go by and I kind of dove into, I'm not an expert by any means, but just like very basic knowledge of SEO, which will have you give us that little snapshot for those that don't know next. But started going through my website with someone with a copywriter and found out like I didn't have some basic things. Like I had no H1 headers that Google likes. I had no alt text on my images. Like I had a lot of missing pieces. So I think that is more common than we think, where we're paying someone for a website. We're assuming they know and are going to make it really functional, but sometimes it's just beautiful, which is great. That's part of it, eye-catching and whatnot, but it's not really going to, work for us like we're hoping and spending money and investing on it being. So start with just give a little brief background, like SEO, search engine optimization. For people that aren't familiar, like why is this important and kind of what is it?
So like you said, search engine optimization. So most people pair it with Google, but it really is something that's relevant to all search engines, whether that be like Pinterest. It's even something that's relevant in Instagram, and we're finding within like podcast platforms as well. But really it starts with there's a set of rules that, I'll use Google as an example. The Google algorithm has, and they kind of want us to follow, really more so, not because they want us to follow their rules, but just because they have some rules that they believe make good content, and they want to make sure that they are serving the best content to the people that are looking for it, right? That's how people keep going back to use Google. So we want to make sure that our websites are set up, or any of our content is set up so that people can find it. It starts really with keywords and using the right keywords, but there are so many different levels and layers to SEO in general.
Okay, how does someone start with finding their keywords? Where do they even
There's so many different options. My favorite tool is called Uber Suggest. And they do have a free version. So it is a keyword research tool where you can go in there, type in a keyword that you think people, within your audience might be looking for, or a keyword you want to be known for. And it will tell you some information. It will tell you how many people look for that term every month, and then how hard or easy is it to rank for that term. So that gives you some really good information to know, like, if no one's looking for this keyword that you want to be known for, that might not be something that you want to prioritize on your website because it's not necessarily going to get you found. Or, going for a keyword that is something so highly competitive that it's going to be you're competing against like major corporations to rank for, that's probably not going to be the best choice either, because now you're going to be spending a lot of time trying to get the traffic that these other businesses already have.
That's a really good point. And I know this happened to me, like I think a few years back, where it was like, I think this is what people would be looking for, like the word they would use. But in reality, people didn't have that vocabulary yet, like life coach or like mindfulness coach. Maybe that is what someone is looking for, but that's not like what they're going to Google to type in and find. And so trying to like figure out what the person is actually going to go to Google and type in, I think is like half the battle, I guess, in my experience too. Like, what do we call ourselves? Especially when we're in this creative entrepreneurial space where, our names of like, what are we doing can vary or be unique. It's not just as easy as being like, I'm a teacher. Like we both were like, there's not just like one name for a lot of what people listening to this podcast are doing. So sometimes it feels difficult.
I've had clients before that were florists and they were like, no, I want to be known for floral designer. And I'm like, but no one is searching for that. They are looking for wedding florist or, something that is so much more like layman's terms and whatever, you might have all these terms, even like for my own title of like SEO strategist. Most people aren't sure that's what they're looking for. They might just be looking for SEO help or what is SEO, so many other kind of like breadcrumbs along the trail of what can then lead them to what you do and who you are.
Yes, so true. Okay, I know that you don't just help podcasters, but for the sake of this show, let's kind of use that as our thing here. How can podcasters use SEO to get their episodes discovered more by listeners?
Well, I know, you posted something recently about changing your podcast name just a little bit, but you put the like words that you want to be found for at the beginning of your podcast name. So that's a really good example of, even outside of that could get you found on Google, but that could also just within Spotify or within, Apple Podcasts, help people are searching for that, podcast mentor, and that will help them find you quicker, right? So you're using a lot of the same practices that you would use within your website, but kind of across your content. So starting with keyword research, what keywords are people looking for that are related to what you do? And then using those within your episode titles, within your descriptions, in your show notes. And then a step further, which is always another step more work, but it can be really helpful, is putting a blog on your website and having either the transcript from your show or your own show notes or own blog related to an episode on that blog page.
Yeah, podcasting and blogging are long form content. So then it's searchable. And that's something that I've recently done in 2025 is switch back to my original website provider of Squarespace, which I had left because I was, cutting costs and moving away from it. Switch back because they have a much better blog option than the current one I had. But yes, I'm seeing that too, like where you can just double dip on the content you're already creating and then repurposing it sort of and getting that extra bang for your buck. So speaking of that, like website type things with podcasting, what are some must-have pages or features on your website? So like someone like me or a lot of the people listening to this would have service-based or digital product, some type of virtual business like you and I have. And maybe we also have a podcast like I do. So you have your website for your business, but then you also have that podcast. So like what are some things that we want to look out for and have featured?
I mean, the main pages, of course, home, I would have an about, but within that about page, somewhere on there, it should also talk about that you're a podcaster in addition to the services that you provide and lead to your podcast page. Your services, again, same thing, like here are the services that I can, work with you on, but also some kind of section that's like, but also look into like free help through my podcast, some kind of segue into, again, leading people to that podcast piece, because some people are going to find you from discovering your podcast or a podcast episode you were on, but also some people are going to find your podcast because they went to your website first. So you have to kind of think of like all points of entry and making sure that you are promoting your services and your podcast together. Like on your podcast, you're probably talking a lot about what you do service-wise.
Yeah.
So same thing on your website, making sure you're referring back to the podcast as well.
That makes sense. Almost like this like interwoven thing where one leads you to the other. And I think when you get clear on your messaging, I know in the last, like for sure year, my podcast is almost 4 years old. Probably when this airs, it'll be 4 years old. But in the beginning, like you just don't know what you don't know and you don't really have a clear message. And for me, it was just like this fun side project. But if you're going to bring in and get really serious about having a website, having services, having a podcast, if they aren't all complementing each other, do you see that sometimes with your clients? Like we got this going on, but then like there's this missing link of, well, how do they match?
I definitely get a lot of clients that maybe they started their business as a wedding planner or something, and then they've added speaker or educator, some kind of like education additional piece onto it, which is similar to a podcast. You have to figure out how that like works into your brand. It can't just be an afterthought or it's going to look like an afterthought to your audience. It has to feel like it is a part of your brand and a part of your marketing plan altogether.
Okay. And what are some common mistakes that you see people making? Would you say you work mostly with SEO on websites or helping people with SEO in other places as well?
I usually work within a website, but I always give, a list of keywords where it's like, you can now use these keywords all over the place. Something to keep in mind for sure. I would say one of the biggest mistakes, though, especially when keywords are on my mind, is that when I go in and I do my keyword research, I then kind of plan out what keywords I'm going to focus on for each page of your website. And that includes, each blog post is its own page. If you are going to try and go for like, again, podcast guesting mentor or something related to what you do, and you want that keyword across every single page on your website, you're really then doing something called keyword cannibalization, where it's fighting itself. Like each of your pages are battling each other to get that top ranking spot. So I know, right? It's like something you wouldn't necessarily think of. And then it's like, oh, wait, yeah, we're not really highlighting the website. When you go to Google, they're showing you different pieces of content, different pages. So we have to think of each of those pages as their own separate content.
Okay. No, that is not what I would have thought. Okay. Is there something else about website SEO things that you do, branding, that we haven't covered yet that you want to make sure people know or you bring up?
Again, like just kind of reiterating before, you hear it all the time in business ownership and especially our kind of like online space, that any content that you produce, try and make 10 additional pieces of content from that, repurpose everywhere you can. And thinking of, a podcast episode, you can do the same thing with those same keywords in different places. That really goes into like your brand that's bringing traffic to your website and also going to improve your SEO by leaving your footprint in multiple places.
And then it also like saves you time and less burnout because you're not like reinventing the wheel every single time. Do you want to give us some ideas of like, let's say we have a podcast episode. How can we then bring it over to our website? How can we use it on social media? Like what advice do you have there?
So if you start with a podcast episode, that's probably your main form of content, hopefully the thing you enjoy doing the most as far as your marketing, if you're going to start with it. And then I would go to your website, make either a blog post or your transcript from the episode, put that within your website as a blog page so it stands into its own content. You could go over to Instagram and then make a reel or a carousel that, again, using that same content from that, and within the caption, using the keywords or the title of the episode, which probably has some focused keywords in it, and going over to Pinterest and doing the same thing, putting out 5 different pins for this same episode, which is now a blog, and really just focusing on whatever areas or whatever marketing channels you are invested in. You can use that same concept through all of them. Email marketing too. That's a good one.
Yes. I've heard Pinterest now like 2 or 3 times just this week, and it's not a place that I'm over at. What is your favorite platform, or is it whichever one someone individually prefers, or what's your take on that?
I have tried to like stay consistent on Pinterest for the entirety of my like 3 years of business. And I just finally this year kind of gave up. And
Okay.
maybe I'll go to it again one day. I think it's so helpful and can be so beneficial for so many businesses. But it really does come down to like, what is your capacity? Can you handle, or do you have the team members to handle going into all of the places? And for me, I just decided earlier this year that I enjoy showing up on Instagram. I enjoy, guesting on podcasts and meeting other people through this. And I like writing my newsletters. And so I'm going to really focus on those areas and then like throw in blogs when I can. And that's kind of where I max out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's wherever you shine.
That makes sense. I feel like if you are feeling that, then you're just going to procrastinate it. And then for me, it like trickles over into everything. I start procrastinating. So just that simple letting yourself off the hook. And maybe you'll go back to it. It's not saying it's like a forever thing, but okay. Yeah, I agree with you on that. So I want to ask, since you have been through my podcast guesting accelerator where we planned and looked for aligned podcasts and things, what do you feel like you've learned or gained from starting your podcast guesting journey?
The biggest thing for me, because I had already been thinking about making podcast guesting a priority this year before I even met you. And then you kind of just like, for anyone that doesn't know, we met through like an Instagram group.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, oh my gosh, you do that? Let's connect. So I just had no idea where to start in like finding good fit podcasts. I didn't know what I didn't know. It's like you go into Spotify or whatever, and you're looking for podcasts that meet kind of the same audience that you serve, but you're coming up with the major big name podcasts instead of ones that are really more like, I work with a lot of solopreneurs and smaller businesses. So I was trying to find that audience and I didn't even know how to get there. And coming to you, who actually has a lot more knowledge of individual podcasts or knowledge of how to find those podcasts, that was the biggest takeaway for me.
Yes. Isn't that so true? You go and you search and that's all you get is the huge big brands. And that's not what I'm trying to guess on either. It's yes.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Have you felt like it has helped hone in on your messaging, just the reps and having to like speak about what you do?
For sure. And I know that like when we met and I was like, am I going to sound repetitive? And you're like, no, because it's different people listening to everything. It's the same thing when someone's like, yeah, you posted that thing on Instagram like 6 months ago, but you can post it again. And I'm like, you can, but yes, you can. So I have totally noticed myself being like, how do I slightly change my bio that I'm going to send someone? But it really does help me get clear on like, this is what I do and who I work with. And as someone that recently rebranded, it's like nice to kind of have that reiteration of it.
Yes. Before we get into like, what does it look like working with you and where we can connect with you, you brought up rebranding. When does someone know that it's time for that?
Oh, this is such a good one. And it is one that's kind of different for everyone. But some of the big tells are either one, you like just don't like the way that your website or your brand look. If you don't love it, then there's probably room there. But another one is if you are trying to reach a different audience or different market, maybe you're just trying to raise your prices and you need your visual representation to show that you're worthy of raising those prices. That's another really good sign that it's probably time.
I think you can kind of feel it too. You're just like, something's off. I need this next thing.
Yeah.
I'm actually hoping that when this airs that I will be working with you going through my own website. So yes, this is good. But it's also, I found that podcast guesting, because of the deep conversations you end up having with the host, even just the host, that's when you end up trading services or being referred, especially if you do it right, where like you have just hit it home with talking about all the things SEO, like very specific things. Like if someone asks me about this is not a topic that I'm going to be able to help with, but you're going to come top of mind because you had such a concise, like cohesive talk today with us, right? I couldn't say enough good things about guesting on podcasts. It feels so much better to me than an Instagram post and things like that. So
yeah, for sure.
What does it look like to work with you? And I know that you have a free website audit that you're offering too. So tell us about that.
Kind of as we covered, I have services individually for brand, website, or SEO, or you can package it all together. But I do love to start with a free website evaluation. So you just put in your email and your URL URL. And then I can go in, take a look at kind of the back end of your site through some tools that I have to see how you're ranking for SEO, and just from a visual standpoint, how your website is set up to convert visitors into hopefully clients.
Awesome. And then where can people connect with you?
I'm on Instagram, and again, that's kind of my favorite place to be. So I'm at Kelly Ryan Co, Ryan with 2 N's, and my website is kellyryan.com.
Perfect. Makes it super easy for us to find you. Thank you for this. I feel like I could talk to you all day about this. We didn't even dive into motherhood and being teachers, but that's a different show, I think. So thanks so much for spending time with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, that's it for today. If this episode gave you a little aha, or you're thinking about guesting on podcasts now, I'd love to hear about it. Screenshot the episode, tag me on Instagram at Candace Dudley, and let me know your biggest takeaways. And don't forget to come back next Tuesday for another episode.